something is sketchy. Let's bring on our foreign policy expert. You can find him at dciadvisory.org. Stephen Yates is with the DC International Advisory, also an advisor for foreign policy to former VP Dick Cheney. Stephen, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Dana. Good to be back.
How odd is the Petraeus resignation to you?
Well, it's exceedingly odd to me. Number one, in this day and age, sad though it may be, an American citizen having an affair with another American citizen is not a national security problem. And so I have a very, very difficult time understanding how this investigation went the way it did, information being held until it was put forward. It's completely believable to me that David Petraeus may have fallen in love with someone else. I leave that to the humans involved. But this is a very, very odd set of circumstances with a very convenient termination date for General Petraeus.
Yeah, it sounds very odd to me. And then they do this the week before the hearings begin. And then they say, well, he's not going to be called to testify. Is he going? Because I keep hearing that he could be. And then Dianne Feinstein says, no, he's not going to be called to testify. Do you think he will?
He has to be called to testify. And it is completely within the discretion of the committee chairpeople. Now, Dianne Feinstein is in charge of one of the committees involved in one of the bodies involved. But in the House of Representatives, they too have oversight committees that are run by Republicans. And it is exceedingly common practice for former heads of agencies to be called to testify before the committees of jurisdiction in the areas in which they served. He was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency in the time in question. And the key to me is not so much the blow-by-blow up to the attack, it's the false narrative. It was the White House, Jay Carney and Susan Rice, speaking on their behalf, that sold a false narrative that they say came from the Central Intelligence Agency at the time. His testimony is essential.
Do you think that, I mean, the FBI, they had to have known about this for quite some time. And it just, we talked a little bit ago to Commander Lippold from the USS Cole, and he's been pretty vocal about this. And, and he says, which I agree with him, that Petraeus, that he, is taking responsibility for his actions and so on and so forth. But I also agree with you in that this seems so odd that the focus on this, that they're thinking his relationship with this woman is a national security issue, and that the FBI apparently knew about this for quite some time, and it didn't become a big deal until right now. And that's the thing that really just kind of gets me. And there are even some Democrats who are saying some of this, this is just a little bit odd. I mean, Peter King was, he has talked about this, even Joe Scarborough and MSNBC. What are they trying to protect? Somebody's trying to protect something. If you had to give your projection as to what this is, what would you make of it?
Well, I think with a lot of big-time scandals in Washington, it probably begins with a simple error that people try to cover up. And in this case, it wasn't actually so simple. It was a genuine false narrative that someone decided to put forward, and now it's provably false. I mean, you have the combination of the 60 Minutes video that was held that makes patently clear that both Barack Obama and Candy Crowley were not telling the truth in the second presidential debate. And you have, I think, repeated evidence of emails and other things from real-time information that say what the administration is saying was not true. And it's actually a big deal for our elected leadership to flat out lie to us over a sustained period of time, and especially in the lead up to an election. And so if Republicans coming out of this election are worth their salt at all, they can head in the direction of Bob Michael-like permanent minority Republicans, just go along, get along, and not challenge anybody. Or they can go back and look in the mirror and say, do we have the pluck and the fight of what the Gingrich insurgents had at the time?
Right.
You know what? We're statutory elected officials. We're calling witnesses. And this guy is an American citizen who had a position of responsibility. He has to testify. And,
right.
Oh, by the way, so does Hillary Clinton. So does Leon Panetta. And you can go ahead and ask White House officials. They can decline because of executive privilege. But you can still go after the information. Democrats do this to Republicans all the time. Republicans shouldn't shirk from it.
Yeah, exactly. I want to ask you about Hillary Clinton, too, in a moment. Is it normal that the FBI would be investigating the director of the CIA? And does it sound normal to you that they would have uncovered this in summer, back during the summer, and then just sat on it until it all exploded, literally right before these hearings began?
Well, there are many elements of it that are not normal to me. Number one, when you enter these kinds of services, you sign away a number of civil rights, and one of which is the consent to be monitored in almost everything that you do. And it is inconceivable to me that the director, a deputy director, and any number of principals in any number of intelligence agencies aren't being monitored by people in those agencies. And so I have a very, very hard time believing that the only people to ever come up with these fake email addresses that allegedly had been set up were the FBI. And I'm also very perplexed about how this all started.
Right.
There is someone who is not a military or Department of Defense employee saying she's being harassed by a DOD employee. That is not. It wasn't even a national security issue. It was just sort of a civil legal matter.
Right.
And so this whole thing took on a life and a direction of its own. My strong suspicion is that General Petraeus may have preemptively resigned just because of his own sense of honor and needing to face up to what he had done. But this was not a new relationship. This was not new behavior. It had to have even been known when he became director of the CIA.
Yeah, because apparently this happened right as he was making his transition to become director of the CIA. And the background checks and all of that, they would have looked at this. And apparently that's when, I don't know. It's just so strange.
It has all the markings of a takedown. And what's absent is the evidence that that's what it is.
Right.
And so, it could just be bare-knuckle Chicago politics going after the guy that they have hated for a very long time because he actually proved Harry Reid lied when he said the war was lost, cannot be won, we should pack up and leave. And he went into that situation and turned it around for an honorable exit.
Well, and that, too, and that's something I keep, again, all of these, different theories that are floating around. Some are saying that he's resigned to sort of remove any consequence of anything that he could say during a hearing. Do you think that there's any legitimacy in such a rumor?
I think that people may have had that calculation. I just don't see it being reality because there is, and as far as I understand, absolutely nothing keeping the statutory authorities from calling him forward to testify.
Right.
You think back to the Watergate hearings and the number of former officials that came and testified way back when. This is a common thing with tons of precedent. Resigning your office doesn't protect anyone from giving testimony. You think of a CEO pillaging shareholders, and that person is somehow not going to be responsible before authorities because they've resigned as CEO. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. And speaking of Hillary Clinton saying she doesn't have time to testify. She apparently was traveling to Australia. Ironically, she and the U.S. government are concerned that Australia may be cutting their defense spending. And so she's going to go down there to conference with the Australians, and so has no time to comment or testify in the Benghazi hearings. I don't think she's going to get her wish. She should testify.
Well, I think she is the world record holder for spending the most time out of the District of Columbia since the midterm elections. So maybe her travel is just so copious that she can't be present for important meetings. No, she has to make time to be accountable to the statutory oversight authority. Just as she can send a deputy to testify, she can send a deputy to go meet with our allies. They won't be offended.
Right.
But I will give her this. At least she's going to a real ally that punches above its weight. We have the President of the United States, newly reelected. And how is he spending his Air Force One time? Going to Burma and Cambodia. For what, I ask?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. Well, all of this, we will see how this unfolds this week. Stephen Yates, D.C. International Advisory. Always a pleasure, Stephen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.